I think that September was clearly a very, very challenging month. That's obvious in the data that's come out today. And I agree with your point that this is a decline that's being driven very much from supply issues rather than demand factors. Our view is that the issues should begin to ease from October, but it's only going to be a gradual improvement from here. I think it's important to remember that in August and September in particular, you had one-off factors that were particularly weighing on global supply issues for chip shortages, coming from the outbreak of COVID in Malaysia, which had a very significant impact on chip availability. So cases have come down in Malaysia, capacity is coming online from chip manufacturers, which yes, will take time, but we think you'll start to see an improvement from October and into Q4, but it will only be gradual.
What will the demand picture look like as production does ramp up? Do you expect the pent-up demand to come back in a big way, or has some of that demand, will it have been lost forever to either the used car market or other reasons? How do you expect the demand picture to evolve?
Yeah, well, a little bit of the demand has clearly gone into the used car market. You can see that from how incredibly strong used car prices are, and also that the used car market's held up a little bit stronger. But there is clearly a lot of pent-up demand building in the system now. And if we look back at 2020, when we had very significant declines in auto volumes as a result of government lockdowns and then a reopening, the demand picture looked quite strong coming out of that. And we'd expect a similar strong recovery as chip availability improves, given that you have volumes down now year to date around 25% versus 2019. I think just to put some numbers to that, if you compare it to the European impact on the impact in Europe on auto volumes in 2008, 2009, which was more of a conventional demand-led decline, we were looking at about -8% for auto volumes in 2008 in Europe. So comparing that to the 25% that we're seeing this year from the supply issues, there's clearly a gap there, of which a lot of it will be pent-up demand that we expect to come back once capacity improves.
So let's continue talking about what happens once capacity improves. You talked about the pricing in the used car market. Clearly, we're seeing cost pressure on the input side of things. So how do you tally rising costs and the inflation pressures that creates with the fact that used car prices are so high? Will auto OEMs be able to offset the increased cost pressures they're facing by pushing prices through to the end markets?
Well, we can look at what's happened so far this year. And so far this year, auto OEMs have done a very good job of pushing price increases through to their customers and really leveraging that favorable supply-demand dynamic that has developed as a result of the chip crisis. So far, they've done a very good job of increasing prices on new cars. That's being supported by two main things. One is the fact that supply is so tight, and the other, which is naturally linked to this, is how strong used car prices are, because the strong used car prices underpin the residual value assumptions that the OEMs can make in their Finco businesses when selling new cars. So they're in a good position to offset cost pressures because of the pricing environment. But naturally, there are some concerns in the market that as supply-demand rebalances, that could come under pressure.
Gabriel, do you see the current energy crisis having an impact on demand for electric vehicles in one direction or the other?
It's interesting because the EV data that we saw in September for Europe looked very, very strong. And on a market-by-market level, the UK, we saw the biggest increase on a month-over-month basis for electric vehicle demand in the UK, where clearly there are issues with fuel availability. And that's probably a short-term impact in terms of how much that's driving EV demand. But it's an interesting case study to show that where there is a lack of availability of fuel for conventional vehicles, that's pushing consumers into the EV market.